Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into the ancient world, into the slow drumbeat of sandals against sand, into flickering torchlight and the endless hush of a desert under moonlight. You're not in your bed anymore. You're in a Macedonian camp, somewhere between what's now Turkey and don't bother trying to name it. The year? Probably 331 BCE. You're tired, sunburned, vaguely itchy, and you've just heard that an owl landed on a helmet 3/10 over. This apparently is a sign. Of what? No one agrees, but it's definitely a sign. Now, let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a week in Alexander the Great's army. Between the full forced marches, dodgy water, and tendency to get ambushed by scorpions the size of soup spoons, things were a bit rough. But that's okay, because tonight, you're just listening. No blistered feet, no bronze helmet chafing your eyebrows, just a soft journey into superstition, starlight, and stories whispered by tired soldiers who saw the moon as more than just a moon. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The army moved slowly under the vast sky, each footstep pressing into dirt that had never seen a sandal before. Nights were both a relief and a risk. Temperatures dropped, creatures stirred, and above it all, the moon watched silently. You'd think ancient soldiers might have focused more on sharpening swords or securing perimeter defense, but honestly, many of them were just trying to interpret the weird cloud that looked like a lion eating a crab. You walk past a cluster of men murmuring around a fire. One of them swears that the moon last night had a ring of fog around it, a halo, they say, and that it always means trouble. Like back at Issus, one mumbles, rubbing his knee, which still doesn't bend right. Another pipes up, no, it means we'll win. It did before Tyre. They all pause to consider that. Then the first guy throws a twig into the fire and says, still creepy. Historians still argue whether Alexander encouraged these celestial obsessions because he believed in them or because it made him seem divine. Either way, he leaned in hard. His favorite bedtime story? That he was descended from Achilles. His favorite mood lighting? Stars. Moonlight had its own language in these camps. A full moon rising fast and orange, that might be the goddess Artemis smiling on you. A sliver of moon lost in cloud? Best to sleep with your boots on. And when the moon disappeared completely during an eclipse, well, let's just say several generals started sharpening their resignation letters. It wasn't just paranoia. Back then, nature was the only Netflix. The soldiers stared at the sky the way we scroll. Stars shifted subtly. The moon sometimes turned red. And comets? Those were practically breaking news. There's a scroll-like rhythm to life on campaign. March, eat something vaguely goatish, argue about omens, sleep badly. Repeat. But under this rhythm, belief hums. You don't mock the signs, not even the silly ones. One guy claimed he saw a moonbeam point directly at his wine jug. The next day, he was promoted. Coincidence? Sure, but the wine guy kept that jug like it was forged by Hephaestus himself. Moonlight affected more than moods. It altered movement. A bright moon meant nighttime marches. A new moon meant stumbling over your own sandals. Commanders started to time operations around lunar cycles. Ambushes favored darkness, but ceremonies loved the glow. Weddings, sacrifices, speeches, all better with a little natural spotlight. And then there's the silence. On a night with no wind and a full moon above, you feel watched. Not just by your fellow soldiers, but by something. An owl hoots, a goat snorts, someone's armor shifts, and then someone, always someone, starts talking about the signs. Even if you didn't believe in omens, you acted like you did. Because if you didn't, and something weird happened, guess who got blamed? You. It's always the guy who scoffed at the owl. The weird thing is, the omens weren't always gloomy. Some were kind. A shooting star at the right angle meant reunion. A perfect reflection of the moon in your water bowl? Protection. A bat flying left to right over your tent? Okay, no one liked that one. Even ancient soldiers had limits. But maybe the strangest thing was how these men balanced myth with mud. They'd talk about Zeus one moment and complain about lice the next. They'd interpret shadows on the moon while chewing dried figs with cracked molars. So tonight, as you lie there, remember this. Someone, long ago, did the same. He scratched his beard, looked up at the moon, and wondered if that pale silver face had a message, just for him. You're back at the fireside, and the owl has returned. It sits silently on the tip of a weather-worn spear planted into the dirt, not flinching, not blinking, just there. Wide eyes glowing amber in the flicker of flames. Around it, the soldiers have gone very, very still. Because here's the thing. An owl landing on your weapon is never just an owl landing on your weapon. It's a sign. And no one wants to be the idiot who ignores a sign. The spear belongs to a man named Diodoros, a lanky Macedonian with bad knees and a talent for carving dice out of goat bone. He isn't important in the big history books, but to the men huddled around him, he might as well be a prophet tonight. He doesn't say much, just stares at the owl like it might speak. Then, in a perfectly serious voice, he says, "It's here for my cheese." Laughter breaks the tension, but only a little, because even if Diodoros is joking, someone else isn't. The older soldier to your left, the one with a nose like a broken sandal, leans over and mutters, "Owls don't land for cheese. That's Athena's bird. This is something else." Owls were deeply woven into the Greek world. They weren't just birds, they were messengers. The Athenians minted their silver coins with an owl right next to the goddess Athena. The Romans would later whisper that an owl's cry meant imminent misfortune. But here in Alexander's multicultural army, with its mix of Macedonians, Greeks, Thracians, and Persians, beliefs about owls blended like river currents, each soldier adding a little swirl of superstition from his homeland. Some thought owls brought wisdom. Others thought they carried the last words of dead kings. One even swore that if an owl turned its head toward your tent, you'd get good news from home. Which was unlikely, since home was usually weeks or months behind them, assuming it still existed. Historians still argue whether the owl that visited Diodoros was the same one spotted a week later perched atop a command tent outside Gaugamela, or whether, it was just an owl doing normal owl things. But that's not the point. In a world where armies marched on faith as much as food, the appearance of any animal at the right moment could ripple through the entire camp like spilled wine across a map. The incident was even noted in a fragment of a soldier's journal. Athenaeus, son of Phocion, reports owl on spear. Men now expect victory. Meat ration improved. The meat, by the way, was probably goat again, or maybe rabbit. Either way, the owl got none. There were rules about these visitations. If the owl landed and stayed, it was good. If it circled and left, bad. If it hooted twice, better. 3 times, troubling. If it pooped, well, let's just say that soldier changed shifts. Back at the fire, one young recruit carefully pours out a small offering of wine into the sand, whispering something under his breath. You lean closer. It sounds like a prayer mixed with a bribe. Something about no twisted ankles, and please not another uphill march. Across the fire, Diodoros is now explaining, with elaborate hand gestures, how he once saw 2 owls during a thunderstorm in Cilicia, right before Alexander caught a fever. The owls tried to warn us, he says, dramatically squinting at the fire like a philosopher. Someone hands him a piece of dried fig just to shut him up. You might think this all sounds ridiculous, but remember, these soldiers faced the unknown daily. They crossed mountains with no names. They entered cities where no one spoke their tongue. Half of them couldn't write their own name, and none of them had a weather app. The world whispered to them in clouds, feathers, and the way goats sneezed before sunrise. Besides, who were they to doubt it? Didn't the owl at Issus appear the night before they routed a Persian force 3 times their size? Didn't the camp outside Babylon hear hoots all night before the walls mysteriously cracked on their own? Okay, that might have been the engineers working overtime, but you try telling that to a man who saw the owl. And so, the owl stayed. Just a bird to some, but a quiet prophet to others. Eventually, it flew off into the night, leaving a few feathers and a lot of questions. No one slept quite the same that night. Some dreamed of wings. Others dreamed of nothing at all. You roll onto your blanket trying to remember if you saw the owl look at you. You think it might have blinked in your direction. Just once. Maybe. And in that moonlit camp surrounded by snoring, whispering, and the soft clink of armor shifting in the dark, you realize something. Belief is a kind of armor too. Not made of bronze or leather, but of story. A story shared between frightened men trying to turn fear into poetry. You fall asleep with the faint sound of wings somewhere above. The moon tonight is strange. It hangs low, swollen and gold, like someone dipped it in honey and forgot to wipe it clean. You're lying on your back, blanket pulled over your knees, a rock for a pillow, listening to your tent mate argue, again, about whether the stars are moving or if the world is just turning under them. You don't have the heart to tell him that no one actually knows. Even Aristotle wasn't completely sure, and he was the guy who once tried to explain wind using logic and onions. Above you, constellations unfurl like forgotten maps. Cassiopeia lounging lazily near the camp's northern edge. Orion, that old hunter, just barely visible as the season changes. And near the horizon, a flickering light that might be Venus, or maybe a torch from the next ridge over. No one checks. Everyone prefers to believe it's a planet making an appearance just for them. The soldiers call this time the Watch of the Stars. It's the hour after the last fires die and before the first goat starts bleeding for no reason. You'd think it would be boring, but somehow it never is, because the sky is always doing something. A new dot here, a weird trail there, a particularly bright star that wasn't there last week. Or was it? Tonight, someone gasps, too loud, and points. A ring of mist has formed around the moon, soft, hazy, dreamlike. A sign, he whispers, too quickly. It means storm. Another counters, it means victory. A third just rolls over and mumbles, it means I'm cold. Historians still argue whether lunar halos genuinely influenced Alexander's military decisions. Some claim he moved troops to avoid bad sky days. Others say he merely used the moonlight for navigation and let the rest of the army invent meaning where there was only mist. But then again, this was the same man who claimed to have been told by a divine snake to conquer Egypt. So, the jury's out. The soldiers, though, they believed. Or at least enough of them did. A glowing ring around the moon might mean gods are watching, or that the air is heavy with something unsaid, or simply that the world, like them, is trying to send a message in the only language it knows, quiet beauty. There's a game the younger troops play, sky dice. One throws a small stone into the air, while another names a shape they see in the stars. If you shout the same thing twice, it's a curse. If three others agree, it's a blessing. No one ever wins. That's not the point. You remember a night like this outside Tyre. The sea had pulled back strangely, and the stars seemed to line up in a way that made one soldier swear he saw a giant arrow pointing toward the city walls. He told the others. By morning, the story had spread. Some even carved the shape into their shields. When the siege engines worked better than expected, well, that was because of the stars, obviously. The engineers rolled their eyes, but no one thanked them. They thanked Orion. It wasn't always peaceful stargazing. One infamous incident outside the city of Persepolis involved a rumor that a comet had split the sky in two, a flaming crack between realms. Half the camp believed it was a sign of divine favor. The other half hid under their blankets. In reality, it might have been a meteor or even a lantern trick, but the damage was done. 3 days of murmured prayers and 0 sleep. There's a theory, among modern scholars, not ancient goat herders, that Alexander used the sky to create cohesion. With such a diverse army speaking so many languages, what better common ground than the stars? Everyone could look up and see the same sky. Everyone could argue about what it meant. And in that shared ritual, a kind of unity was born. Of course, not all signs were celestial. The soldiers believed in dust patterns, odd bird calls, the way their sandals tied, and whether a particular beetle crossed left to right or right to left. But the sky was dependable. It showed up every night, uninvited and unbothered, offering puzzles no one could quite solve. One man, a Thracian with a truly heroic mustache, claimed he could read the sky like a scroll. He'd walk through the camp pointing things out. That's the scythe of Artemis. Means a quick victory. That cluster there? Goat's belly. Not great. He was wrong half the time, but he said it with confidence. And that's what mattered. Tonight, the stars seem unusually bright. Someone hums a soft tune. Another scribbles a prayer in the dirt with his finger. You sit up for a moment, rubbing your eyes, and notice the moon's glow reflecting off the metal rim of your helmet. For a second, it looks like it's glowing. You smile and tell yourself it's just a trick of the light. But in your heart, you wonder. Because in this army, under this sky, meaning is everywhere. It shimmers off armor. It dances in torchlight. It settles gently on your blanket like dust from Olympus. And you sleep beneath it all, wrapped not just in wool, but in wonder. You wake up in Egypt. Well, technically, you woke up in a cramped little tent near the edge of the Siwa oasis, with sand in your ears and a frog hopping around your water jug. But let's not get distracted by frogs. The point is, you're somewhere sacred. And Alexander is acting different. He arrived days earlier with a small group, slipping away from the main column of his army. The mission? To consult the Oracle of Amun, a reclusive temple buried in the shifting dunes. It said the oracle speaks only when the moon is right, when the desert winds are quiet, and when the visitor is worthy, or at least extremely famous. Now the army camps on the edge of the oasis, trying not to eat the sacred palms. You stretch, blink up at the sky, and notice a thin crescent moon has risen before sunset. A quiet ripple passes through camp. It's said that when the moon appears early, spirits are active. No one knows where that saying came from, but no one really argues with it either. Alexander returns that evening. No fanfare, no trumpet, just sand-crusted boots and a strange look in his eyes. Not tired, not triumphant, something else. He doesn't speak much, but word spreads like smoke. The oracle called him son of Zeus. Now sure, historians still argue whether the oracle actually said this, or whether Alexander just felt like it had. The records are, let's say, vague, but everyone agrees something shifted that day. Alexander started watching the moon more closely. He asked about star positions. He lingered near the fires when men whispered about omens. He even carried a new amulet shaped like a spiral. Wind and moon, someone called it. Probably meaningless. Definitely mysterious. You walk past a group of officers that night, arguing softly about the future. Egypt has fallen without a fight. The people declared Alexander pharaoh. They even offered him a crown, but he waved it off. Not that kind of ruler, he reportedly said, though he didn't give the gold back. Later, under a sleepy palm tree, someone tells a story. It's about the night of the oracle visit, about how the moonlight seemed to guide Alexander's path across the dunes, turning the sand into silver, how he followed a jackal, yes, a jackal, toward the temple gates, and how the guards let him pass without a word, like they'd been expecting him. You snort. Sure, maybe. Or maybe that's just the kind of tale you tell when you're camped in a land older than your gods, surrounded by pyramids that look like they're waiting to wake up. Still, something is off. Since returning from the temple, Alexander has been quieter, more meditative. He walks alone at night. He stares at the moon like it owes him an answer. The men say he was given a vision. Some think he saw his own empire, stretching like moonlight over water. Others think he saw nothing, and that was the message. Silence as destiny, subtle, philosophical, slightly terrifying. There's a new ritual in camp now. Every night, a soldier stands outside the king's tent and reports on the moon. Clear, he says one night. Clouded, the next. Blood-tinged once, in a hushed voice that made several nearby men kiss their lucky medallions and pretend they weren't scared. The strange thing is, the moon does start to feel more present. It shows up in conversations, in the shape of sword hilts, on the carved lid of someone's supply chest. A coin minted in Egypt bears a new symbol, a crescent wrapped around a falcon. No one knows what it means. Everyone pretends to. It's here in Egypt that Alexander's obsession with signs sharpens. He begins blending traditions, Greek, Egyptian, Babylonian, into a new ritual style. Sacrifices are timed with the stars. Prayers are offered not just to Zeus, but to local gods like Thoth and Amun-Ra. Even the astrologers, once camp curiosities, are suddenly invited to strategy meetings. One night, a soldier wakes screaming. He says he saw a dream. Alexander standing in a silver doorway, the moon behind him, holding a torch made of bone. He didn't speak, the man whispers. He just pointed at me. Everyone nods solemnly. No one laughs. Someone quietly moves their blanket farther away. The desert is like that. It gets into your mind. It slows time, makes shadows move oddly, makes the moon seem impossibly large. You start to think in symbols, in fragments, in glowing circles and sand that remembers things. You lie back and look up. The sky is oddly blue, even this late. The moon pulses softly, and for a moment, you wonder what it knows, if it's ever spoken to anyone. If maybe, just maybe, it did say something to Alexander. Something only he could hear. And so the legend grows. The man who spoke to an oracle, who walked by moonlight through the dunes, who now stares into the sky as if he's reading the next chapter of a book no one else can see. You pull your blanket up to your chin and try not to think about jackals. You wake up to the scent of cooked meat and incense, which is either a very good combination or a deeply unsettling one. You poke your head out of the tent and find half the camp gathered near the center, murmuring, as a priest waves a bundle of smoking herbs over what looks suspiciously like a goat's lower intestine. Yes, friends, it's entrail reading day. This isn't a one-time thing. It's part of the routine now. You've marched into the heart of Mesopotamia, and the deeper you go, the more the rituals multiply. Goat entrails, bird flights, dust patterns, the occasional accidental sneeze being declared divine. It's a full-time superstition schedule. Today, the focus is on the liver. A glistening, slightly steaming organ is laid out on a bronze plate while the soothsayer gestures at it like a chef explaining a complicated reduction sauce. This bump here, see how it curves? That's a favorable sign, he murmurs, pointing with a thin reed. Everyone nods. No one knows what it means. The priests are a mix now. Some are Macedonian, wearing their usual threadbare cloaks and leather belts. Others wear flowing robes and strange jewelry, Persian, Babylonian, Egyptian. They chant in multiple languages. Half the soldiers don't understand any of it, but the sounds are nice and rhythmic, so they pretend. Someone near you whispers, "The goat's spleen had a mark like a star." Another adds, "Last time that happened, we got new boots." Possibly unrelated, but let's not ruin the magic. These rituals aren't just campy distractions. They serve a real function: comfort, predictability, a sense that the swirling chaos of war can be tamed by correctly interpreting a goose's honk or the exact direction a beetle walks before breakfast. Historians still argue whether Alexander truly believed in all this. Was it showmanship or genuine conviction? He certainly acted the part. Always present at the sacrifices. Always the first to toss a pinch of barley or wine onto the flames. Always solemn when someone declared that Jupiter had spoken through a crackling log. The soldiers, meanwhile, have developed their own brand of half-serious rituals. One group never straps on their greaves until after sunrise. Another swears by eating figs before battle and only from the left side of the bowl. And there's a particularly superstitious Thracian who carries around a small cloth owl, carved and sewn from rags. He insists it keeps scorpions away. And, to be fair, he hasn't been stung yet. Then there are the moon-timed sacrifices. These happen quietly, away from the general bustle. A priest might rise before dawn and wait for the first silver sliver of moonlight to peek through the canopy or tent flap. At that moment, he'll whisper a phrase, light a piece of parchment, and nod to himself as if something important just happened. No one ever asks what. You begin to notice that victories are often credited not to strength or strategy, but to signs. "We won because the moon was high," one soldier says after a siege. "Because the owl returned," says another. "Because the goat's heart steamed to the left," mumbles a third. Logic is not the strong suit here. One evening, after a particularly elaborate rite involving crushed mint, bronze bowls, and a worryingly calm chicken, a priest declares that tomorrow will be auspicious for forward movement. Everyone cheers. They march. They run straight into a flooded riverbed and have to wait 3 days for the water to lower. "Well," says the chicken priest, "perhaps the signs were symbolic." You're not sure what that means, but you admire his confidence. Still, for all the theatrical flair, these rituals build community. They make the army feel more like a family, albeit one with a fondness for smoke, feathers, and heavily symbolic vegetables. And when the sun goes down and the firelight dances across polished armor, there's something oddly soothing about hearing someone mutter, "That cloud looks like a helmet, that means protection." You lie back on your rolled cloak and stare upward. The moon is full again, casting pale shadows across the landscape. You can hear the priest somewhere still murmuring, probably to the spleen. A dog barks once. An owl, yes, another owl, calls from somewhere distant. And you wonder, not for the first time, if it's all nonsense. Or if there's something hidden in the rituals. Not truth, exactly, but comfort. A reminder that even in the face of unknown terrain, strange enemies, and ridiculous food, you can find order in the stars. Or the guts of a goat. Your friend Diodoros appears at your side. Holding a strange rock he insists he found under auspicious circumstances. He's planning to sleep with it under his blanket tonight. You nod. Seems reasonable. Because in Alexander's world, everything might mean something. It starts with a feather, not a particularly grand one, no eagle plume or phoenix tail, just a small, dusty, owl-colored feather floating down onto a soldier's breakfast fig. The man stares at it, startled. Then he grins like he's won the lottery and declares, "We'll take the city by sunset." The others laugh, but no one moves the feather. It stays right there on the fig, like a divine stamp of approval from Olympus, or from whatever mysterious bureaucracy handles battlefield omens. The city in question is Halicarnassus, a coastal fortress with stubborn gates and a population extremely disinterested in surrendering. Alexander's men have been camped outside it for weeks, trying not to melt under the sun while their siege engines groan like sick cows. And yet, somehow, a tiny feather shifts everything. The story spreads fast. A messenger has arrived, some say. An owl's blessing. One soldier even claims he saw the owl land atop the city wall in the early morning light, just for a second, before disappearing behind a tower. Straight toward the citadel, he whispers, as if that direction matters. By noon, every cook fire in camp is buzzing with variations of the same tale. Some say the owl carried a scroll. Others add flourishes. Glowing eyes, a silent flight pattern, shaped like the Greek letter for victory, an uncanny pause just above Alexander's tent. None of these details appear in the official records. Historians still argue whether there ever was an owl at Halicarnassus. Some dismiss it as camp gossip spiraling into collective hallucination. Others suggest the feather was planted by a clever officer to rally morale. A few, more fringe scholars, note that owl sightings were unusually frequent along the western coast during this particular year. Migration patterns? Divine mischief? Pick your favorite. What matters is what the soldiers believed, and they believed the owl meant something. By sunset, the siege ramps are moving faster. There's a noticeable energy to the troops, like someone whispered the end of the story, and it's good. When the gates finally fall, more due to internal sabotage than magical birds, the men celebrate not with strategy talk or engineering praise, but by toasting the feather. One guy even tries to wear it in his helmet until the wind takes it back. Means the mission's complete, he says with an exaggerated wink. This, by the way, is not an isolated incident. Feathers become something of a motif after Halicarnassus. Men start keeping them as charms. Some braid them into armor straps. Others bury one in their satchels for luck. Diodorus, ever the enterprising philosopher goof, ties one to his spearhead and insists it makes his jabs 20% more effective. No one argues. Feathers also creep into the artwork. A shield gets painted with a small silver owl in the corner. A tent flap stitched with a pattern that looks suspiciously avian. And in one tent, Alexander's personal quarters, a cup bearing a delicate engraving of an owl in flight is spotted briefly before disappearing again into the royal supplies. Was it a gift? A statement? A prank? No one knows. But the owl stories don't stop. In Tyre, a soldier says an owl hooted just as his ladder reached the enemy wall, and he wasn't shot. In Egypt, a pair of owls reportedly flew over the Nile the night before a storm conveniently disrupted a hostile fleet. And at the Tigris, someone claims an owl stared directly at a Persian scout until the man turned and fled. Look, are these moments verifiable? Not really, but that's never been the point. The point is that belief makes reality bend around it. If only a little. Just enough. Alexander, for his part, neither confirms nor denies the owl stories, but he does begin using the symbolism more openly. A new standard appears. Black fabric, silver thread, a crescent moon cradling an owl in flight. It's quiet propaganda, mystery made portable. By now, the debate isn't, did it happen, but why does it keep happening? One scholar today calls it feather logic, the way small events accumulate symbolic weight until entire tactical movements hinge on the sighting of a bird or the curve of a cloud. It's a form of morale engineering, or poetic madness, or both. Back in camp, another feather lands, this time on Diodorus' scroll. He squints at it and grins. "That's twice now," he says. "Means I get dessert tonight." Someone hands him a fig. No one questions it. The feather becomes part of the daily rhythm. You find one on your cloak and smile all day. Someone else loses theirs in the wind and insists on taking the next watch shift to rebalance the signs. And through it all, the owl watches. Sometimes real, sometimes imagined. Perched in trees, flying overhead, nested in dreams. A silent partner to conquest, as calm as the moon and twice as mysterious. You sleep that night with a feather tucked under your rolled-up tunic, just in case. Tonight, the commanders are whispering. You don't know exactly what they're whispering about. Something to do with the next leg of the march. But you do notice that they've all conveniently remembered to wear their lucky bracelets, polished their armor just so, and offered a double portion of wine to the moon-facing altar near the central tent. Which can only mean one thing. They've seen something. Word trickles down the ranks. A bad sign. A cloud shaped like a skull, or a bird flying backward, or possibly a lizard crossing the general's path with too much urgency. No one knows for sure. What's clear is that morale is drooping faster than a goat in summer. And then, just before the main campfire is lit, a new rumor flares up. Alexander smiled. Apparently, someone caught a glimpse of the king standing at the riverbank last night, arms crossed, staring up at the moon. It was half hidden in cloud, and he was muttering something, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a poem. And then, without warning, he gave a small, satisfied smile and walked back to his tent. The story spreads within hours. The bad omens? Forgotten. The feather shortage? Overlooked. If Alexander smiled, the signs must have turned. Historians still argue whether Alexander was consciously manipulating these moments, whether he used omens, moon signs, owl stories, dreams to maintain control over a vast, tired army. After all, belief is a powerful tool. If a commander can convince you the stars are aligned, you march faster. If the moon winks at you, you pick up your spear a little steadier. But whether or not Alexander believed these signs, his soldiers did. And so, they mattered. There's something sly about how he does it. He never declares omens publicly. He just appears in the right place at the right time. Silhouetted by moonlight, lit from below by sacred fire. His cloak occasionally catches the wind at just the right moment, and suddenly you're thinking, maybe this man really is touched by the gods. The army, as if on cue, adopts a new tradition. Before any major movement, the commanders meet by torchlight under the open sky. No tents, no parchment, just quiet words beneath the stars. They call it consulting the night. It's unclear if they're consulting the heavens or just watching each other squint dramatically, but it works. The troops feel seen, included, like even the night has a vote in what comes next. Soon, officers begin tweaking routines to encourage favorable signs. One rotates the guard schedule so the luckiest soldier is on watch when the moon rises. Another times announcements to coincide with certain lunar positions. A Thracian captain insists that battle briefings should only occur after owl sightings, just to be safe. You walk past a chalkboard outside a mess tent where someone has drawn a crude weather and omen chart. There are 3 categories. Moon clear equals good. Moon clouded equals eat light. Moon missing equals pray. Very scientific. But this manipulation isn't always cynical. Sometimes it's tender. A commander tells a scared group of recruits that the clouds they saw during training are protective formations, ancient signs of safety. The boys sleep better that night. He sleeps better too. In one particularly clever move, a general arranges for a local stargazer to accidentally spot a rare alignment of stars shaped like a Macedonian helmet. This means the gods approve, he announces to a crowd. The next day's march is the fastest in weeks. Modern military manuals don't really include chapters on how to stage an omen. But back then, it was strategy. A weird kind of soft power morale warfare. Less about swords, more about stories. Still, not every attempt works. One ambitious lieutenant tries to release a trained owl during a promotion ceremony. Unfortunately, the owl refuses to fly, glares at everyone, and then poops directly on the new captain's sandal. The men laugh for hours. The lieutenant is reassigned to river latrine duty. There's a lesson in that, you suppose. Belief can be encouraged, but never forced. The signs have to feel real, even if everyone knows they're a little made up. It's like telling a bedtime story you half remember, trusting that the rhythm will carry the meaning. And rhythm is everything. The camp has developed its own rituals, timed by the moon. Laundry on waxing crescents, armor repairs on waning ones, haircuts, oddly specific, only under a gibbous moon, because apparently half moons leave things half-finished. You lie awake under a half-finished sky, the stars tangled in drifting clouds. Somewhere nearby, a flute plays a slow, off-key tune. A donkey sighs. You hear footsteps, probably Diodoros on some weird midnight mission to count feathers or stare meaningfully at puddles. You think again about Alexander, that subtle moonlit grin. Whether he smiled because he saw a future, or because he knew that you thought he did. And you wonder, if belief keeps you warm, keeps you marching, keeps you from crumbling when the dust settles, does it matter where it started? Maybe that's the real magic. Not that the owl flew, or that the moon shone, but that someone believed it meant they could make it one more day. The jungle comes out of nowhere. One moment, you're marching through dry, rolling hills. The next, you're swallowed by a thick green wall of heat, vines, and insects that have clearly never heard of personal space. Welcome to the edge of India. The air is wet. The sky never stays the same color for more than 5 minutes. The moon, when it shows up at all, seems nervous, like it's peeking through the clouds just long enough to say, "You sure about this?" Alexander's army has changed too. Leaner, warier, more decorated with charms than ever before. Feathers, moon pendants, bone beads, bits of cloth tied in loops, a whole wardrobe of tiny superstitions swinging with every step. This far from home, the signs are harder to read. The stars are wrong. The winds don't behave. Owls are replaced by monkeys that shriek at sunrise and throw questionable objects at passing soldiers. The men are unsettled. They miss their omens. They miss their owl gods and lucky clouds and predictable patterns. And so, they start making new ones. A beetle with golden stripes becomes a symbol of safe passage. A lotus flower blooming before battle is now considered divine approval. One soldier starts painting moons on his shield, not the usual crescent, but full and wide like a giant silver coin. "So it sees me," he explains, dead serious. In this strange land, belief becomes more important than ever. When nothing is familiar, meaning is the one thing you can create from scratch, like a tent or soup. One night, a torrential rain finally ends, and the moon appears in full for the first time in days. A soldier cries, just openly weeps, says he thought he'd never see it again. "Didn't feel like myself without her," he whispers. No one laughs. They understand. Historians still argue whether Alexander's decision to halt at the Hyphasis River, what we now call the Bees, was due to military logic, the wariness of his troops, or something stranger. Some claim he saw a vision. Others say he interpreted a celestial event, a cloudy lunar eclipse, as a signal to stop. Officially, it was his soldiers who refused to go further. Unofficially, everyone was waiting for a sign to turn around. Alexander reportedly climbed a hill that night, alone, and sat facing the moon for hours. Not commanding, not strategizing, just sitting. One soldier, who'd followed at a distance, said the moonlight caught on his armor like it had never done before. He glowed, the man said, like he was part of the sky. A day later, they turned back. The homeward journey was slow, almost meditative, not just because the terrain was brutal or the weather uncooperative, but because they were no longer chasing something. They were carrying something, a story, a mythology, a constellation of meanings stitched into every blanket, feather, and glance upward. The moon followed them back, sometimes hidden, sometimes bold. The men kept up their rituals, prayers before sunrise, feather checks before meals. One unit invented a new chant, "Owl above, lead with love." Catchy. A little weird, comforting. In Babylon, as Alexander prepared for what would unknowingly be his final days, the sky gave one last sign. A lunar eclipse, deep red, ominous, and impossibly quiet. The priests panicked. The soldiers whispered. Diodoros insisted it looked like a helmet dipped in wine. That helped no one. The moon hung there, silent and enormous, while fires burned low and the camp held its breath. No one slept. Even the animals seemed nervous. And Alexander? He said nothing. Just watched. Some say he read in that moon his own ending. Others think he saw nothing. Just another moon, another cycle back, another glowing face in the sky that never truly explained itself. And now, you lie here, centuries later, safe in your bed, staring up at your own ceiling, or your stars if you're lucky enough to sleep under them, and realize something. That army, those dusty men were a lot like you. They needed signs to keep going. They needed stories to make the darkness less strange. They whispered meaning into shadows and feathers and moonlight, not because it was logical, but because it worked. Because belief, even soft and strange, can make the hardest roads feel walkable. Because the moon never stopped watching. Because sometimes, in the face of all the unknowns, it helps to think that the owl landed for you. And maybe it did. Now, let your breath slow. There's no more marching to be done, no more omens to decode or feathers to chase on the wind. The owl has flown. The moon is quiet. You're safe. Let your body sink deeper into the mattress or the floor or wherever you find yourself tonight. The world around you softens, edges blur, sounds fade into velvet. Even the stars are starting to dim, slipping one by one into the hush between dreams. Picture that old camp, still and silver beneath the night sky. Soldiers curled into blankets, some snoring, some whispering their last sleepy thoughts to the fire. A single owl glides silently overhead, barely stirring the air. It sees you, briefly. It always does. The moon above watches too, soft and silent, the same moon Alexander once looked up at, wondering what it all meant. Wondering if it meant anything. And now, centuries later, you lie beneath it too, still wondering, still reaching, still soothed by the simple rhythm of belief. The march is over for now. You've wandered through myths and moonlight across deserts and rivers under stars that once decided the fate of empires. And still, here you are, still breathing, still dreaming. Let the night hold you gently. Let the stories rest and sleep.